The phone rang, punctuating the silence of my office on a Thursday morning, at the very end of September. I sat staring at the figures from my quarterly pension statements, a tedious, monotonous task drowning out the hum of the empty mansion. The caller ID flashed a name that sent a chill down my spine. Martin Westbrook, my estate attorney. We'd worked side by side for 20 years, and in all those years, he'd never called without reason. Only on business, only when a storm was brewing. Robert, his voice, usually velvety and measured, was bowstring-like. I need you to come to the office today. Instinctively, I clutched the receiver, as if trying to squeeze meaning out of it. What's the matter, Martin? Pause. I could hear him breathing. It's about Patricia's safe deposit box, the one we just discovered. The air rushed out of my lungs. Patricia. She was gone for 3 years. A hellish 6 months, from the pancreatic cancer diagnosis to the silence that has filled every corner of this house ever since. What locker? I breathed. She didn't say anything. I found the key, among her papers, when I was finalizing the inheritance papers. Robert, he lowered his voice. Be here at 2, and please, come alone. What I have to show you, it's best to see it alone first. I agreed, hung up, and stared out the window for a long moment. The Connecticut forest glowed beyond the glass, a madness of crimson and gold. Our house, our mansion on 5 acres in Fairfield County, stood as if carved from this autumnal gilding. 40 years of marriage, 30 years of practice. We were building a fortress. Stupid, blind old man. I was building a crypt. At 2 o'clock sharp, I sat across from Martin in his office, which smelled of old wood and money. Without a word, he placed a small envelope between us. I recognized the handwriting instantly, Patricia's elegant slanted letters, my name, and nothing more. The safe deposit box was in the branch she used before moving into that house. Martin's voice was quieter than the rustle of paper. The bank only found me last month. They've been charging fees from the old account all these years. He pushed the envelope forward. Inside was a single sheet of her signature stationery. The date, 3 weeks before she passed away. My dearest Robert. The very first line caught my throat like a prickly lump. If you're reading this, I'm gone. I need to say something I didn't have the strength to say in life. I gulped and read on, each symbol cutting into my consciousness like a knife. I overheard Daniel and Marcus in the hospital. They thought I was unconscious from the morphine, but I heard every whisper behind the door. Darkness crept from the edges of the page. My son's words. How long does she have left? About 2 months, then I can focus on my father. Their voices, hers, merged into one deafening, vile hum in my head. Daniel's fake startup, Marcus's gambling debts, 47,000, her investigation, her cold, death-defying horror. I tore myself away from the page and looked up. Martin was looking at me with bottomless, heavy pity. There's more, he said quietly. I forced my gaze to scan the rest of the lines. Her confession. I provided for them. I didn't want to see them. Her desperate plea. Protect yourself. They're waiting for me to die so they can convince you to give them everything. Don't let them. And the last thing that broke my heart. I wish I had been stronger. The paper crunched in my trembling fingers. I carefully placed it on the table, as if it were a pre-detonated grenade. When? I asked hoarsely. July 19th. She died on August 7th. So she carried this inside her for months, dying of cancer and the rot she found in her own children. And not a word to me, lest I shatter my fragile world prematurely. Is this letter enough? My own words sounded alien, flat. From a legal standpoint? Martin leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. It documents intentions, concerns about exploitation. Along with other evidence, it's priceless. But Robert, he took a breath, tell me honestly, has anything happened in these 3 years that matches her words? Images swam before my eyes. Daniel, moving into the renovated basement, temporarily, until the startup takes off. Marcus and his wife Beth in the guest house, just for a couple of months, until we find our place. No one moved out, no one offered a cent, only requests. First for small things, car repairs, paying a bill, then tens of thousands for debt consolidation, investments, down payment, like clockwork. Her posthumous scenario was playing out with terrifying, mocking precision. That's it, I whispered, just as she predicted. Martin silently opened his desk drawer and handed over a business card. David Chen, private investigator, former FBI, discreet as the grave. Talk to him. I took the card. The plastic was cold and incredibly heavy. This call would sever the last threads, but not making it would be like spitting in Patricia's face, in her dying scream from a forgotten safety deposit box. "I'll call today," I said, and the words carried a quiet note of no return. The drive home took 40 minutes. 40 minutes during which my life was ground to dust and reassembled. An ugly, alien mosaic. My son's visits to the hospital, their obsessive questions about the will, about investments, about my plans for the future. Their whispers in the corner of the kitchen after the funeral. And I, an old fool, saw it as concern. Patricia, however, saw it as predation. The mansion greeted me with the same immaculate, frozen facade, the same ostentatious idol. But now I saw through the walls. I saw the basement where Daniel had taken root. I saw the guest house that had become Marcus's fiefdom. My fortress had become a dormitory for my personal vampires. Laughter and the hum of the television drifted from the living room. I passed by without breaking stride, not responding to Daniel's cry. "Hey, Dad, come in. I have something to talk about." I stepped into the office and clicked the lock, cutting myself off from their world. In a silence that smelled of old books and betrayal, I pulled out a business card. The numbers danced before my eyes. I dialed the number. David Chen answered on the second ring. His voice was calm, firm, devoid of any emotion. "Chen speaking." And I began to speak, slowly, haltingly at first. Then the words rushed out, bursting forth with 3 years of pain, with rage, with despair. I spoke of the letter, of my sons, of the safe deposit box that had become a capsule of truth. The voice on the other end listened silently, and only occasionally did I hear short, clarifying questions, precise as a scalpel. 3 days later, I met David Chen at a coffee shop 20 miles from home. A safe, professional distance. He looked to be in his 50s, with graying hair cut short. But his eyes, his sharp, attentive eyes scanned the entire room, every person, every exit, in a second before settling on me. Those eyes missed nothing. "I've conducted a preliminary investigation," he said without preamble, handing a thin but hefty folder across the table. His voice was even, devoid of any drama, which made the facts sound even more terrifying. "Your son's digital footprint tells a very interesting story." He opened the folder. Inside were not just papers, but evidence, cold-blooded, irrefutable. Printouts, screenshots, statements. Everything was obtained legally, as he assured me with his gaze. I preferred not to ask about the methods. "Daniel's startup," Chen pointed at the Venture Launch Solutions logo. "The website is beautiful. There are 12 employees on LinkedIn. But this business is not registered in the state of Connecticut. At all. No LLC, no tax IDs. The office address is a post office box at a UPS store. The phone number connects to a virtual number, a complete phantom construct." He looked at me. "The website is built on a cheap template, cost $200, no more, and he showed it to you as if it were a real business." My throat tightened. I nodded, recalling his pleading, glowing eyes. 40,000 to hire a key developer. Chen turned the page. His expression grew even more serious. "Marcus, this is more disturbing. He has active accounts on 3 online poker sites. The total debt is $47,218. It matches what your wife discovered, down to the last cent." The numbers struck like a hammer. Patricia had been right. She hadn't guessed. She knew. And she'd been harboring this bitterness within herself, dying. "But that's not all." Chen put the printout aside. "I've seen their correspondence. With your permission, I want to install surveillance in the house, audio only, no video, in the common areas. I have a feeling that if we make them feel safe, they'll tell us what we need to hear." I imagined their laughter through the wall, their certainty that the old man in his office was deaf and blind. I imagined Patricia listening to their whispers in the hospital corridor. History was repeating itself, but this time I had a chance to record it. "Go ahead," I said, and the word carried the scent of finality. The devices were installed the next day, while the boys were away. Chen's team worked ghostly. Tiny microwave transmitters and smoke detectors, in an old radio, in a frame containing my own diploma photograph. 7 listening points. The entire house was entangled in an invisible web, and I sat at its center, in the study, with headphones on. 5 days, silence. Or rather, routine. Dinner discussions, squabbles over the remote, idle chatter. On the 6th evening, when I was beginning to doubt everything, Daniel's voice poured out of the headphones. He sounded relaxed, almost benevolent. "I'm telling you, we can drag this out for a year, maybe even 2. The main thing is to play slowly." My heart sank and stopped. Marcus's laughter echoed through the air, the same frivolous laugh I'd always considered a sign of his creative nature. While Beth keeps feeding him fairy tales about finding his nest egg, he believes we're saving every penny. Sophia's voice joined in, thin and calculated. "Dan, what about your startup? When are you going to ask again?" "Soon," Daniel replied, and in his tone I heard the same son who'd begged me to believe in him. "But not now. We can't look desperate. The idea is for him to offer to help, to make it look like he's the one taking the initiative." I sat there, holding my breath, my fingers digging into the table. They were in my living room, in the house their mother built, and they were planning how to pick my father's pockets. "The point is," Marcus lowered his voice, "the inheritance is already ours, but if we can squeeze money out of it now, it's a pure bonus. 40,000 for Dan, 35 for my consolidation, 75,000 on top while he's alive." Daniel's voice, with a disdainful smirk. "Mom's insurance is already ours. We won that. But the real prize is the house and the retirement accounts, the lion's share. We just need to play the doting sons a little longer." "What if he gets married?" Sophia interjected. "He won't," Beth retorted confidently, almost with aplomb. "He's still in mourning for Patricia, and that's to our advantage. No new wife, no threat to the will." I ripped off my headphones. The silence in the office was deafening. The walls, the books, the view of the forest. Everything seemed like a flat set, a prop. Outside the window, the last leaves swirled and fell. They were making these plans while their mother was dying in pain. I wasn't a father to them, but a cash cow, a bank account that needed to be cleared. The next morning, I called Martin. My voice sounded alien, metallic. "I have everything. Audio, financial evidence, Patricia's letter. I want to set up an irrevocable trust and begin eviction proceedings for both of us." Martin froze on the other end of the line. Then he sighed heavily. "Robert, do you understand what this is like? This is the end, period. There will be no going back." "They set the period, Martin, not me. I'm just drawing a line. An irrevocable trust requires at least 3 weeks' notice. I can get it down to 2. Eviction. In Connecticut, without a lease, 60 days' notice is required. You can serve both notices simultaneously." "Yes, and I want to collect market rent from them for the entire period. For 3 years, 2, plus damages for fraud." "That's harsh, but given the evidence, it's more than justified. At market prices in your area, it'll come to around 90,000. The records will give us grounds for a fraud claim." "Do it. That's it. The papers will be ready today." The trust documents arrived a week later, a thick folder. I read them late into the night, delving into every clause. My house was no longer mine, becoming the asset of an impersonal, ironclad machine. The pension accounts were under the same protection. After my death, everything would be distributed according to my will. The legal minimum to my sons, 5,000 each, a symbolic spit on the grave. The rest would go to the Cancer Society, the dental school where I once taught students not to fear pain, and the foundation in her name. The foundation in her name, 2.3 million, which they had already been sharpening their teeth for, was forever gone from their rapacious hands. I signed every page. The feeling was strange, not triumph, but a devastating, icy lightness, as if I had lifted a weight I had been carrying for 3 years, thinking it was love. The eviction notices lay in 2 envelopes on my desk, official, institutional, heartless. 60 days to pack up my belongings and my lies and disappear. I decided to hand them over at dinner. On Sunday, I said I wanted to bring the family together, for the first time since Patricia's death. Daniel and Marcus arrived with a noticeable, poorly concealed excitement. I saw it in their eyes. The old man had softened. The time had come to reap the benefits. They arrived at 6, all 4 of them. Daniel with the predatory Sophia, Marcus with the calculating Beth. I fed them a simple meal, roasted chicken, stewed vegetables. We ate almost in silence. Conversation faltered. They waited for me to finally lay out my plan. the one in which they saw themselves as the main beneficiaries. They waited for me to open my wallet. They waited for the continuation of my small, convenient lie. And I looked at their faces, illuminated by the soft light of the chandelier, and thought about the quiet click of the bolt on the trap they'd built for themselves. After dinner, I stood up. My movements were slow, precise, as if I were defusing a bomb. I took 2 thick brown envelopes from the sideboard. I placed one in front of Daniel, the other in front of Marcus. The sound of the paper hitting the wood of the table sounded like a gunshot. "What is this?" Daniel chuckled, but a shadow flickered in his eyes. He opened the envelope first, pulling out the paper. I saw his eyes scan the lines, the color draining from his face, leaving a deathly, waxy pallor. Eviction notice. The letters seemed screaming. Dry, soulless legalese. 60 days. "Dad, what is this? Are you kidding me?" Marcus roughly tore open his envelope. His gaze lingered on the headline, then darted to me, disbelieving. Beth peered over his shoulder, her slender-fingered hand flying to her mouth, stifling a quiet cry. "You have 60 days to vacate both living quarters, the basement apartment and the guest house." My voice was even, like a protocol being read aloud. "You've been living here without any contract and without any rent. That's over." "This is insane." Daniel jumped up, his chair crashing to the floor. "We're your sons, your flesh and blood, family." I silently opened the laptop next to me. I found the file. The click of the mouse was deafening in the deathly silence. And then their voices poured out, crystal clear, unadulterated, filling the dining room, which still smelled of fried chicken. "We can stretch this out for another year, easily. 40,000 for Daniel's fake business, 2.3 million total. Keep playing the supporting sons." I let them listen for 2 minutes, the juiciest, most revealing parts. I watched their world crumble. Daniel ran the gamut from crimson anger to sallow fear. Marcus stared at the table, his neck and ears flushed with crimson shame. Sophia burst into tears, quietly but hysterically, sobbing into a napkin. Beth stared at the laptop, as if she saw a gun barrel pointed right at her. I stopped the recording. The silence returned, but now it was drawn out and poisonous. 3 years, I said, and the calm in my voice probably frightened them more than the screaming. For 3 years you've been plotting to squeeze everything out of me. How to squander the money your mother and I had saved our entire lives. She knew. Patricia knew everything. I pulled her letter from the inside pocket of my jacket. I unfolded it and began to read, out loud, slowly, clearly, imbuing every word with her pain, her despair, her deathbed sobriety. The hospital corridor, the whispers behind the door, the debt figures, the fake startup, her icy terror. Mom wrote this?" Marcus's voice broke into a whisper, trembling with some childish, lost terror. 3 weeks before she died, she tried to protect me from you. Now I'm protecting what we built together. Dad, listen, please. Daniel took a step toward me, his hand extended in a gesture that once would have been touching. We can explain everything. I raised my hand sharply. Stop. Enough. It's over. I've created an irrevocable trust. Everything I own is now protected. Upon my death, you will receive only what is legally due, 5,000 each, not a cent more. You can't do this, Beth shrieked, her face contorted with anger. We'll challenge this. We'll fight it in court to the bitter end. With what evidence? I cut her off coldly. The audio recordings prove fraud. Your poker debts, Marcus. You're fake, Daniel. Patricia's letter confirms my sanity and her fears. You will lose, and you will lose miserably. Sophia's sobbing grew louder. Daniel instinctively placed his hand on her shoulder, but his gaze, dark and calculating, was fixed on me. The masks had fallen. All that remained was a predatory, naked calculation. The eviction is perfectly legal, I continued. 60 days. If you don't move out by that time, the sheriff will kick you out. And I'm suing you both for 3 years of unpaid rent. At market value, that's $90,000. That's cruel, Marcus whispered. And for the first time, something resembling understanding sounded in his voice. We are your children. You stopped being my children when you started seeing me as prey. 60 days. I turned and walked out of the dining room, without looking back. My footsteps echoed in the hallway. I walked into the study, closed the door, and clicked the lock. A dull, final, metallic click. Behind me, beyond the oak door, the world exploded. The crash of a chair overturning. Daniel's loud, inarticulate scream. Sophia's sobs, turning hysterical. Voices overlapping, accusations, panic, cursing. I sat down at the table, placing my palms on the countertop. They didn't tremble. 10 minutes passed. The chaos outside the door died down, replaced by a tense hum. Then, a cautious knock. "Dad," Daniel's voice was unnaturally even, measured, commercial. "I know you're furious, but let's discuss this like adults." I remained silent, my breathing evenly. We were wrong, but that doesn't mean we have to destroy the whole family. I opened my laptop and created a new document. I began writing down the chronology of the evening. Date, time, participants, what was said. For Martin, for history, for the court. The knocking continued. Now Marcus's voice, muffled, pleading. "Dad, please, we will pay. We will improve. Give me one more chance, just one." 60 days, I said, loud enough for the words to filter through the wood. The footsteps retreated. A muffled, furious argument was heard. Then 4 distinct, sharp slams of the front door. 1, 2, 3, 4. They were gone. I sat in the study until late at night. The house was silent. A real, deep silence, without the background hum of the television, without the sound of strangers' footsteps. My home. It was becoming mine again, or would be in these 60 long days. I thought of Patricia, of the strength it took her to write these words, feeling her life slipping through her fingers. I opened my email and wrote to Martin. "It's all done. They're aware of the eviction, the trust, the records, and the lawsuit. Get everything in motion." The reply came almost instantly. "Working on it. Keeping my finger on the pulse. You're doing great, Robert." The next 8 weeks became a warped course in applied psychology and survival tactics for me. My sons tried everything. First week, they brought mutual friends, a couple Patricia and I knew, with pitying eyes and talk of reconciliation. I politely declined tea and conversation. Second week, their lawyer sent a threatening letter, hinting at unfair influence over an elderly person. Martin responded by sending a package with audio transcripts and a copy of Patricia's letter. We never heard from that lawyer again. Third week, Daniel arrived with an expensive bouquet and eyes brimming with remorse. "I've realized it all, Dad. I was blind. Let's start over." I accepted the flowers, nodded, and closed the door without a word. Fourth week, Marcus played the illness card. Beth, sobbing into the phone, reported his mini heart attack from stress. I sent a neutral fruit basket to the designated hospital. I didn't go. Week 5. They staged a therapeutic intervention. They brought in some serious-looking man with a notepad and barged into the house unannounced. Without further discussion, I called the police and reported the break-in. They fled without waiting for the sirens. Week 6. Despair. Through their new, more timid lawyer, they offered to pay off the back rent. I forwarded the offer to Martin, who immediately filed it as an acknowledgement of the debt. Week 7. The attempts ceased. The sound of tape, the clanking of boxes, and muffled, angry arguments came from under the floor and through the walls. Beth was lashing out at Marcus. Sophia was howling at Daniel, the sound of disintegration. Week 8. I hired David Chen again, this time to install a full-fledged security system. Cameras all around the perimeter, motion sensors on every window and door, panic buttons in every room. I wanted the big day captured from every possible angle. The 60th day arrived on a cold, gray November morning. The ground was hard from frost. I made arrangements with Martin, and at 9 a.m., his car and the official SUV, along with 2 sheriff's deputies, pulled up in my driveway. Official, legal, final. Deputy Williams, a massive man with an impassive face, approached the basement apartment door and rapped his knuckles. Daniel opened it. He was wearing wrinkled sweatpants and a stained t-shirt, a chaos of half-packed boxes, dangling wires, and bare walls behind him. "Sir," Williams's voice was polite, but left no room for discussion. "This is the official eviction procedure. You have until midnight to remove all personal belongings. Anything remaining after that will be considered abandoned property." "We need more time," Daniel muttered, his eyes darting to me, standing a little ways off. There was no longer any pleading or anger in them, only cold, concentrated hatred. "You had 60 days," Williams replied calmly. Noon is very generous. At the guest house, Marcus swung open the door before Williams could even raise his hand to knock. His expression was strange, devastated, resigned. Beth stood behind him, clutching the doorframe. Her posture screamed defiance, but her eyes betrayed panic. "I know," Marcus said quietly, not looking at the deputy. "We're leaving." "Before noon," Williams confirmed, without emotion. I watched this spectacle from the second-floor office window, like a director overseeing the final scene. They were loading things into a rented U-Haul truck. Their movements were slow, tired, as if they were lifting each box not from the floor, but from the bottom of the sea. Daniel took several steps, his back tense as a bowstring. Marcus was furiously but silently proving something to Beth, jabbing a finger at one of the bags. Sophia sat in their old car, her forehead pressed against the glass, completely indifferent. At 11:45, there was a knock on the front door. Firm, insistent. I opened it. We stood in the doorway, separated by the threshold and years of lies. Daniel, for the last time. "I hope you're happy now," he sighed. There was no anger in his voice, only a bitter, acrid weariness. "I simply acknowledge that every action has consequences," I replied. "You planned to use me. I put up a shield. We are still your sons. You made that choice 3 years ago. When your mother was dying, you chose money. I simply respect your choice." His jaw clenched so tightly, white spots appeared on his cheekbones. "Fine, but don't expect us to be there when things get tough, when you're a frail, lonely old man." "I won't wait," I said simply. He turned abruptly and left. He didn't look back. He climbed into the cab of the truck. Marcus, with one last glance at the guest house, climbed into his sedan. Both cars pulled away, slowly crawled along the gravel driveway, turned onto the highway, and disappeared into the gray November light. My sons were leaving my land, forever. The deputies thoroughly checked both empty homes, half-empty bottles under the sink, a broken hanger, a stain on the carpet, an emptiness that smelled of defeat. Williams handed me documents with official seals. "They've left. If they show up without your permission, call immediately." When everyone left, I was left alone in the silence. I went down to the basement. I paced the empty apartment. My footsteps echoed loudly in the bare rooms, ringing in my ears. Then came the guest house. It smelled of stale air, cheap takeout, and other people's sweat. I threw all the windows wide open. The cold November wind rushed in, howling in the emptiness, blowing away 3 years of their unceremonious, greedy presence. My phone vibrated in my pocket. A text message from Daniel. 3 words. "This isn't over." I looked at the screen, then deleted the message. I blocked both numbers. Forever. The trial dragged on for 4 months. Martin conducted it with an iron fist. During the disclosure of evidence, details emerged that made my heart clench. Daniel managed to borrow from 2 of my old dentist friends, $5,000 from one, 10 from the other, all under the same fairy tale of a startup. Marcus's online poker debts turned out to be even more monstrous than Patricia knew. Not 47,000, but 63,000, spread across 5 different platforms. The judge was merciless. The decision was in my favor. 90,000 for the rent due, 15 for legal costs and compensation for fraud. A total of 130,000. They didn't have that kind of money and couldn't have it. The court ordered a 20% withholding on any future income for the next decade. They tried to hide behind bankruptcy, but the decision remained in effect like a vice. I felt no triumph as I watched their financial collapse, only an icy, joyless relief. Patricia's warning had not been in vain. Her voice had been heard. Spring had come to Connecticut. The mansion, deafeningly quiet and too spacious, resembled a museum. I began traveling, to places Patricia and I had always planned to go, but always put off. Portugal in April, where the sun warmed my skin. Scotland in May, with its harsh, cleansing winds. On each trip, I took photos and wrote her letters in a leather-bound notebook. "Dear Patricia, the monastery in Alcobaça is exactly as you imagined it. You were right. It's beautiful. Thank you for warning me. Thank you for your courage." I became a volunteer at that very same cancer center. I helped confused people sort through paperwork, sat in a chair next to those undergoing chemotherapy, and simply listened. It was simple, honest work. It provided a quiet, bittersweet comfort. In July, I sold the mansion. Too many rooms, too many shadows in the corners. I bought a compact, cozy house a couple of miles away. 3 bedrooms, 2 acres of land, everything I needed. The trust worked like a Swiss watch. Money flowed into cancer research, scholarships for nurses in Patricia's name, and aid for dental students from poor families. I was no longer protecting a legacy. I was creating one. On what would have been our 45th anniversary, I went to the cemetery. I brought her favorite white peonies. I sat on the cold stone bench next to her, looking at the granite slab. "You were right about everything," I said, my voice unusually loud in the quiet of the alley. They waited, they counted, but I stopped them. I saved what we built. I'm fine now. Everything is finally fine. Only the birds chirped in the branches. I pulled her letter from the inside pocket of my jacket. It was laminated, the edges worn from repeated handling. I reread it. Again. Her handwriting, her pain, her love, captured on a single sheet of paper. "Thank you for being stronger than both of us," I whispered. "Thank you for that scream from the past." On the way home, I passed the same coffee shop where I'd met Chen. I swerved into the parking lot. I ordered her drink, a French vanilla latte with double foam. I sat by the window, watching the life outside. An elderly couple strolling leisurely, arm in arm. Young parents pushing a stroller. A businessman furiously dictating something into his phone. An ordinary world. My life was no longer ordinary, but it had finally become real. Protected. Honest. Mine. That evening, my new lawyer called. "Mr. Klein, we've received applications for the Patricia Scholarship. 47 candidates. The committee would like to hear your opinion on the finalists. Send me your dossier. I'd be delighted to study it." After the conversation, I opened my laptop. 47 faces, 47 stories, 47 chances to do something truly important. To honor Patricia's memory not by protecting her from greed, but by supporting those who believe in goodness. I thought for a second about Daniel and Marcus. Where are they? I don't know. And I don't want to know. Their lives, their choices, their consequences. My life is here, in this quiet house, in a volunteer vest at the oncology center, in a folder with student applications, in a notebook with unsent letters. Peace bought at the price of breaking with those who turned out to be strangers. It was worth it. Every second spent, every tear cried. Before bed, I opened the journal, which, on Martin's advice, I now kept scrupulously. "Today marks a year since that day," I wrote. "The house has been sold. The trust is operational. The scholarships are being awarded. Patricia's warning has been fulfilled. Her memory lives on in her deeds. I regret nothing." I closed the leather cover and turned off the light on the bedside table. Outside, summer cicadas sang, and the distant, lulling hum of cars drifted in. Ordinary, peaceful sounds, the sounds of life, which, after a long and terrible winter, had finally returned.